Hello and welcome to Catholic Unscripted. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Gavin Ashenden.
Gavin Ashenden, we're meeting today to do some post-Trump reflections because there's so many reflections to make that one video is not enough. So I suspect for the next week or so, we will be reflecting on this historic victory, really quite a seismic shift in culture. As Mark said yesterday in our video, Trump didn't just win by a small margin. He didn't win like Labour won over here, who did not win as convincingly as the seats make it look. So he won the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. Things are coming in every day about the Hispanic votes going his way, the Latino vote. More Black Americans have voted for him. I think today there was a statistic about Native Americans voting for him was 68%. So he really trounced the Democrats, and it was really an absolutely wipe the floor with them, an astounding win. So this tells us something, and I think being able to pick that apart is going to take some days at least. So we're back to have further discussion. Unfortunately, Mark, the huge Trump supporter, can't join us. Can't join us today, but we'll endeavour to go into greater depth.
Katherine, the reason I wanted to do this is because I felt that my own response was really very inadequate. To tell you the truth, I've been caught up in a kind of victorious tribalism. I've been watching Twitter. I've been looking at the tears and the hysteria of the people who have been threatening us and rubbishing us, destroying our children, destroying education, and playing their part in the growth of an ever less and less soft totalitarianism. And I feel like someone's been let out of jail, and I'm bouncing around and I'm dancing up and down, and I can't stop partying. But I don't think that's good enough, because I think the issue is much more serious than did my team win or not. And so I'm very glad to have this, to be able to take this on further with you, because it seems to me that much of the conversation that's taking place is, do you like Trump or not? If you like Trump, you can't be a person of good taste because he's so brash and he's so loud. And he once mentioned a conversation in a locker room that the people bring up endlessly and time again in a way that suggests that they are the ones who are completely addicted to locker room talk, not Trump. But I think what's going on is much more important at depth than this, because Western culture was about to be completely overrun by a soft and increasingly hard totalitarianism. The progressive left were moving to destroy everything that Christianity built of beauty and integrity in our culture. In particular, they were going to destroy the notion that people are valuable, as Martin Luther King said, despite their skin color, despite their class, that we're valuable as human beings. They were drawing people into this terrible, racist, anti-white, anti-male collectivism. And they were introducing our children into a kind of gender dysphoric madness. They were melting down the structures of society that allowed men and women to fall in love with each other and have children and grandchildren. We were being sucked into a whirlpool of dysfunctional anarchy. And the fact that Trump has won is not necessarily a victory for MAGA or for white men. It's a halting of this whole demonic process. And I think we ought to be allowed to talk about what's at stake without being pilloried for whether or not we've got taste to love the way the orange man has a big mouth or not, because that's just so puerile. And we ought to have the capacity to think more deeply, to ask the Holy Spirit to help us discern more deeply. And we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of that. And in my case, it's because I've been let out of jail and I'm jumping up and down and having a party and enjoying Twitter. But I think I think one of the things that we can do as Catholic Unscripted is to try and give some more, if I say theological thought, I don't mean to be pretentious, but to give it some better quality of thought than the tribalism that inevitably we're caught up in at this stage of things.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's a distraction, a lot of this. It's not to deny it. I think people have this strange view that if you say that anything good about Trump, if you make any supportive claims, if you believe he's someone we should vote for, then what sort of person are you? You can't call yourself a Christian because he's used horrible language like "I want to grab her pussy." Now, saying that is disgusting. It's a revolting thing to say, and there's other things that he said that are revolting. But he is a product of the culture that we have grown up in. The culture is rotten. The culture is disgusting. This kind of locker room talk happens up and down the country, in the UK, in the US, across the West, talking about women as if they're usable objects. And what creates that kind of language but this culture, this contraceptive culture, a culture that screams about the rights for women to use contraception, to have reproductive rights, to take charge over their own bodies. And it's so shallow, it's so blind, because you're not taking charge over your own body. What you're doing is you are setting up the conditions to be an object of use when you scream about your rights, your reproductive rights. And of course, what's the inevitable knock-on effect? Men begin to see women as objects of use and begin to talk about grabbing their pussies and trying to get into bed with them. You want to contracept so that you don't get a disease, so that you don't get pregnant. If you do get pregnant, you can abort the child. Why wouldn't men up and down the country who want to use women like this be championing abortion? So what really annoys me after the Trump win is women saying he's terrible for women. Yeah, the words he used about women and the disrespectful way in which he spoke about women were disgusting. However, to reduce him and the whole of his campaign, the whole of his leadership, to reduce him to that, ignoring everything else he's done, ignoring all his policy decisions, ignoring the stability in the Middle East when he was president, ignoring the introduction of some of the greatest judges in the Supreme Court who overturned Roe v. Wade, ignoring the bipartisan agreement over the First Step Act, ignoring all of these things because this man used locker room disgusting talk and other things that we won't go into all the details. I think is if you're going to do that, at least be consistent. Do that and then absolutely criticise the whole disgusting culture of using women. And I bet you a lot of people criticising Trump for those words and saying how sexist and horrible he is have taken part in this culture of abusing women, have taken part in the one-night stand culture, have taken part in nightclub pickups, have taken part in encouraging contraception, have taken part in encouraging abortion. So to say Trump's used horrible language while encouraging that kind of locker room culture, I'm sorry, I've got no time for it. You either criticise that culture, you say, I don't want to be part of it, I don't want to act in a way that will incarnate this horrible reality, or just be quiet about Trump because you know better than him.
I think that's all true. And I think I put it even more simply than that. I think what I object to so much is, for example, that, you say men have engaged in locker talk. They have. Most men, 98%, maybe higher, watch pornography. No man can criticize Trump because all of us in the privacy of our lives have behaved in ways that are not dissimilar from that single phrase that everyone always trots out and uses. So first of all, it engages a degree of hypocrisy that is improper to use as a lever to beat somebody with. Secondly, there's a whole business of association. It's always guilt by association. As you quite rightly say, there are other ways of judging someone's character, including by their achievements. Jesus judged people not by what they looked like, but by what they did. Elon Musk was really very good in an interview recently when he said that what he hated was people who hid behind an appearance of goodness but did evil. And this whole locker room defamation stuff is to pretend a virtue by the person who's using it when they're not any better themselves. And therefore, nobody should do that. And the only reason that we have that in the public domain was because the people who hated conservative forces thought they could really destroy Trump's character by taking this private conversation and putting it in the public domain so that everyone would only ever think of him like that in future. There was Emily Maitlis, one of our feminist interviewers, said to Boris Johnson, whom I frankly despise, a man of vacuity in his actions, would you leave, when he was trying he said, well, I've met Trump and he's really quite courteous in real life. And then she said, would you leave your daughter alone in a room with him? As if this 78-year-old politician would somehow pounce on an 11-year-old. I mean, the madness, the lack of perspective that this feminist showed meant that she was deranged, effectively. We talk about Trump derangement syndrome. But you see, I want to move beyond Trump and say that what he and Vance represent is the opportunity to stop this small minority of progressive thinkers and actors taking over the whole of society. It's the long march through the institutions. Most people don't believe in gender dysphoria. Most people don't believe in the homosexualization of society. But the activists have got in, and they're using all the mechanisms of social control to impose it on us. What Trump has done is to stop that steamroller and say, let's protect the Judeo-Christian culture, and allow the majority not to be bulldozed, to be blackmailed. I think this is enormously important, because otherwise, within the next 4 years, all the handholds of our society would have been swept away. And for the moment, we have the chance to rebuild. Vance is a faithful and I think very attractive Catholic man. I like his personality. I like hillbilly energy. I like the way he thinks. I like what he stands for. I like the fact that he comes with a Catholic frame of mind. And what this victory has done for me is not to bring the orange man into power, but it's to prepare in 4 years' time for a Catholic presidency that can build on the foundations that they're about to set down to stop this terrifying totalitarianism. It's not about left or right, MAGA or non-MAGA. It's not about feminism or masculinity. It's really about whether or not human beings are going to be given the space in our society to think freely, to talk freely, to act freely. If people don't like Jesus in society, they don't have to be Christians.
To speak freely, to act freely, and to think freely, but not an arbitrary freedom from constraint, but freedom for something. And I think where there is legitimate criticism of Trump, I agree. I think that the orange man, the rude man, the sweary man, the insulting man, the locker room man, the divorcer, the adulterer, all of that, I understand that, because I understand he's a human and he sins. So none of that is a surprise to me. But I would rather focus, if we're going to be critical of Trump, on our Christian culture. That I think there are questions to be asked about his stance around IVF. I think there are questions to be asked about his support for gay marriage. Now, these are legitimate criticisms if he is not strong enough on defending the Christian ideas of one man and one woman to be married, exclusive, permanent, lifelong, life-giving. The IVF is akin to abortion in that it destroys life. Now, I want to see him speaking up strongly against that. Where he doesn't, or where he appears to support those things that are against the dignity of human life, then I think that has to be, that's a conversation that has to be had. I don't think it's a case of saying Trump's a saviour, but what I disagree with is the erosion of him completely based on the things like the coarse language and the rudeness and the locker room talk. I think that's a distraction. And the reason I think it's a distraction is just what you've said about the likes of Emily Maitlis. It's what always happens. It's like you talk about this soft totalitarianism. That's exactly what it is. We will have the perfect society. We will bring about this utopia. We will bring about a lovely society where no one's offended, nobody's hurt, everyone gets to be who they want. But the only way we can do it, as has always been the case when you try to bring about a utopia, is by tyrannising those who disagree. It happened in the French Revolution. We're going to bring about this wonderful society, these values of liberty, equality and fraternity. And isn't it a wonderful vision? And all we have to do is have Robespierre and his reign of terror with the gulags and the communist revolution, wherever we see it. We're going to bring about this utopia. It will be brilliant. Nobody will be homeless. Nobody will starve. Everyone will have a home. There'll be bread for everybody. But the only thing is, if you don't agree with it, we have to eradicate you. We have to get rid of you. Now, people might laugh and say that isn't happening. There's far more danger, as I see it, with this tyrannical clamping down on our freedoms coming from the left than there is coming from the right. So all of those criticisms about Trump's character are playing to that very mindset that says, but all we want is nice, all we want is comfort, all we want is to everybody to be lovely. We're not horrible, we're not tyrannical, but to bring about that utopia, you inevitably have to be tyrannical. And that's when our freedoms start to erode. And we should be very worried about that. So if we buy into that, let's not say unkind things and Trump's too mean, then we miss as well all the good things about Trump, all the strong, powerful and important things. But we do need to pick him up. I don't know about me, but people need to pick him up on those things where he's not strong enough yet. Catholics need to pick him up on IVF, gay marriage, abortion.
I think I agree with most of what you said, but I'd like to make
most, Gavin.
Well, right up to the last two sentences, I think all that you said was very good there. I said but then I've got a problem with the last two sentences. I mean, yes, of course, argue with him about IVF and gay marriage, of course, but I think the problem is that we slip into the left view that if there's one imperfection, then he fails our test. The Gospels are very different. The Gospels are so liberating. Jesus says when it comes to the woman caught in adultery, everyone agrees that this is immorality. But before you punish the woman, before you demonize and exercise her, you need to work out whether you're in a position to throw the first stone, and you're not. So you can't do that. When it comes to the Good Samaritan, there are all kinds of reasons for being critical of the Samaritans. They got so much wrong in terms of the checklist test. They got less than 50%. But nonetheless, Jesus chose a flawed person who fails a 50% test to show the importance of having compassion on a neighbour, digging into his own pockets, not the state's.
Yeah, they also don't realise that the story of the Good Samaritan is a parable about the church, but never mind that.
Well, that's true too. You can expand on that in a minute. That would be just brilliant. But what I'm trying to say is that the Bible is full of rogues. If you look at all the heroes, they are, David and elsewhere. David was a terrible family man. He had a really quite dodgy personal private morality. Jacob was a bit of a scaredy cat. God takes very flawed people, and out of their willingness to cooperate with him, and above all their capacity for repentance, he brings heroic acts out of them. In other words, nobody qualifies to be used by God because of their virtue. And so I don't care how unvirtuous Trump may or may not be. What I really care about is, has he stopped the demonic left? Thank God he has. And is he willing to be spoken to about the virtues of Christian and Catholic morality? Yes, he is. Is he going to get all of it? No, probably not. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that he isn't completely closed off in the demonic and mad way that the progressive forces who've been destroying our culture have been. We are so lucky, so blessed. This is such a moment of relief and getting out of jail, the fact that they've been stopped by the electoral process. And so I think we need to stop talking about the limitations of the politicians and do as you've just been done, which is to say, what are the virtuous legislative programs we need to give people the freedom to make their own moral choices. People will always make wrong choices, but we can't force them to be virtuous, but we can make sure that they're informed and they have certain freedoms, as you say, freedoms to achieve.
Freedoms for something. You began by saying you didn't agree with me fully, and then said we can't slip into this idea of if someone has one imperfection, he fails our test. I don't think that is what I was saying at all. I thought there was a possible extension of what you were saying. Like so many people in an argument, I take the argument of my opponent and I extend it further than they've done it in order to win. I didn't really mean to do that. You didn't say that. That's true. Sorry. So you were saying don't slip into the idea of saying if someone has one imperfection, he fails our test. First of all, I began by saying that I totally agree with you. By drawing to his vices and his imperfections, we shouldn't be distracted by that. I do care about his virtues to the extent that I care about his soul, and I pray for him and his soul, and I pray for all people, as I do, that they, that they have a conversion of heart, that they return to God who created them. But that's a separate matter. I wasn't saying that these imperfections mean he's not good enough. I'm actually advocating for a Trump presidency. I'm glad he won. I think he should win. But what I'm trying to say is we have to do both and that's a very Catholic way of thinking, isn't it? We have to both support Trump because he is definitely a better option than Kamala Harris and the Democrats for all the reasons we've already discussed. But we don't just stop there and rest on our laurels. There has to be a continued campaign of saying, this is great. You said he's seen off the demonic left. What I'm saying is, I don't know that he has fully seen off the demonic left, because as long as he is advocating for IVF, for gay marriage, if indeed he does or his administration does, then there's still some of that demonic stuff there. So what I'm saying is, as Catholics, I'm speaking on a Catholic channel as a Catholic and saying, I'm glad Trump won. I'm glad about his presidency. I'm glad that the Republicans are in power. I think it's a brilliant result. But let's remember that there are battles still to be won. And whilst you can't force people, I think it's incumbent upon Catholics to keep raising their voices about pro-life issues, which extend beyond abortion to IVF, and of course, most threateningly now across the West, to euthanasia, potential assisted suicide laws.
That's absolutely right. One of the things that struck me was how many progressives there are in America. I'm not sure what the figures were, but I mean, let's say for a moment he won the popular vote 42, 52, 48, a bit like the Brexit thing. It still means it's only a couple of percentage points, and all the rest of the people who didn't quite make it to 50% of the vote are still completely committed to this terrible madness of the progressive left, and they're in charge of all the organizations. So in terms of what's got to be done to liberate society, you're right. We haven't even begun. I mean, my fear for the church is that people don't understand quite how dangerous the left is in terms of the way it wants to censor and punish and restrict and control people who believe Christian things, or actually believe anything they don't believe. And the fact is that they're almost the majority. I mean, they nearly are by skin of a teeth. It's only by skin of a teeth that they're not. So one of the things we have to do as the church is to harness all our abilities, intellectual, spiritual, moral loquacity, to try and persuade people that what the vision of humanity that Jesus came to bring, the truth that sets you free, is so much more valuable than the compulsion that forces you into a kind of political goodness, but does nothing to change human nature. And that's the problem with the whole of the leftist utopian vision. They think it can be done by force, and they keep on forgetting that it always leads to the gulags and the death camps.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change human nature, because they haven't, and they won't understand, they haven't adopted the view that we have from Genesis, which is that human beings are made for greatness and for God, but we carry this profound flaw from generation to generation. And only the Holy Spirit, only Jesus can save people from this flaw, which is why we're passionate Catholics and not passionate right-wingers.
Yeah, which brings us to Pope Benedict XVI's fabulous quote, so pertinent to many of today's issues, which is, "You were not made for comfort; you were made for greatness." Yeah. When I was teaching, I used to get that made up on the cards for all my students leaving at the end of the year to do their exams, so that they went away with a little card reminding them always to keep in their purses and wallets, which I hope they still have. Any of you watching, check your wallets and purses and make sure it's there. That you were not made for comfort, you were made for greatness. And indeed, the law should be pedagogical, as we've said. There has to be a vision for the human person, and that recognises the human person as created in the image and likeness of God, and with dignity. So I agree there with everything you've said. And you only have to see what's happening here with Labour in just the first few weeks. That tyranny that you've spoken about, that clamping down on the freedoms to bring about that vision. We've had a farmer end his life over the budget. We've had the punishing budget, and we've had the man who committed suicide after being locked up for so-called hate speech. So this is very real. And my friend Lois McClatchy Miller, who speaks regularly against abortion and is a pro-life speaker working with Alliance Defending Freedom, she gets attacks, verbal attacks, threats of horrible things I don't want to mention, simply for stating the view that abortion is a terrible evil against the human person, and shouldn't, she was saying today on the news that 1 in 3 women in the UK will have an abortion. So it's that tyranny again, isn't it? It's that thing that the very people who are on the left, who say we've got to be nice, Trump's horrible, the right wingers are horrible, they're all stupid and horrible, who, when things don't go their way, are absolutely vile in their language and in their approach. And I've seen it time and again. I think I saw one of those women on that terrible programme that Whoopi Goldberg presents, The View, saying they were talking about the Latino vote or the Hispanic vote that went Trump's way. And one of them said, well, the Hispanics are misogynists. And you think, hang on, how quickly did it take for you to, because it didn't go your way, to make a massive sweeping statement against a whole race of people? It just people are shown up. I think they're shown up that these ideas have them, and they're hooked on ideologies rather than being driven by a true love of their fellow man, by a true love of their nation, by true love of their family and their friends.
That's right. I'd like to extend what you said to say 2 things. I mean, often in conversations, you say to people, "Oh, you're wrong," and then but we're not arguing. We're building on each other's perceptions, which is very helpful. So the 2 thoughts that I had that sprung out of what you said was, first of all, tyranny. We have got tyranny in this country. I told you, and not everyone will know this, but that I was asked by a group of local people who support Reform, which is this anti-immigration party that's not on the left, if I'd speak to them. And I've never done any politics. The whole of my life, I've not got involved in active politics, and I didn't think I ever wanted to, because I'm passionately convinced that the gospel is what's needed. There has to be a transformation of the inner person, and wasting time on the outer person is time that you could be spending for conversion and holiness. However, they said, we'd like to hire a little local village hall, and would you please address members of Reform locally on why they need to be Christian, because some of them follow this program and they know that's what I believe. And I want to take the Tom Holland thesis, which is to say everything you value actually comes from Jesus and the Gospels. And if you really want to flourish in terms of things you believe in, you're going to need to be practicing Christians, because otherwise you don't have the resources to overwhelm. And this is another thing we could have talked about but haven't done, which is the underlying battle between good and evil that is actually the undercurrent of everything we've talked about. Anyway, so they said, fine, here's a date. Well, I heard today that the people who own the hall, having heard that I was going to come and talk to these members of Reform about how they might want to consider their spiritual roots, have cancelled it on the grounds it's only for entertainment. What that really means is we're not having you. And they don't at all mean it's only for entertainment. They're just using that. So cancel culture stretches right down to even a group of small fuddy-duddies wanting to come and talk about their common and collective life together. So that's the first thing. The soft totalitarianism is absolutely in place, stopping freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of discussing ideas. We're going to have a lot of trouble pushing back against that just to meet each other. But the next thing is that, as I mentioned before, because I'm still feeling very raw about it, I lost one of my best and oldest friends that I studied law with. We were like brothers. I have 4 sisters. He felt to me like the brother I've never had. And once every 6 months or so, we'd get together and we wouldn't stop talking, just in terms of the excitement of not having been around each other's brain for 6 months. And he sent me an email to break the friendship about a few months ago, and said that he and his wife were profoundly disappointed that I had been seduced from the spiritual perspectives that they accepted I engaged in, and I'd become political. And this broke my heart, because at one level, he's entitled to think that. I've been, as I just did already, I've been arguing against Christians being political on the grounds that they need to deal with conversion and transformation, and that it was only liberal Christians who became political because they had no sense of metaphysics. They'd lost a sense of the need for conversion. And so they took all their kind of spiritual utopianism and made it political utopianism because it was easier, and they lacked that bit of bandwidth to see the work of the Holy Spirit. And so it looks to the casual observer, and I'm afraid my friend, I think, must have become that, as if because you and I, for example, are now talking politics, we've done what the liberals did. We're getting involved in politics. It isn't that. It's that the political people have come onto our territory. They've taken their politics to come and close us down. And so the only way we can keep this opened up is by responding politically. We didn't choose to be political. We're not doing this as a kind of sort of referred utopian aspiration. We're defending the capacity to speak and think and act from a very repressive ideology which wants to shut us up, close us down, and if necessary, send us to prison. And the only way we can do that is to meet their politics with a different kind of politics. It was nicer 30 years ago when we that didn't come against us, and we had this amphitheater in which we could persuade people of the need for the gospel. But now, as totalitarianism has grown more ambitious, they've brought the political fight to us, and the only way we can preserve the privilege of speaking and thinking to each other without being sent to jail or having the police sent for because we're doing a hate crime or a prayer crime is by fighting them politically. They've left us no choice. We have to do it.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. And I also think this is why education is so important. This is why schools are so important, and probably why schools were targeted in the long march of the institutions, is because they know if you get the kids, if you form their minds, if you mould them, then you can change a whole culture. You can bring down civilizations. So that's where the destruction happened. And I think that's where the renewal has to take place. We need better teachers. We need good schools. We definitely need our Catholic schools to be better than they are, and we need our bishops to be. Right. We need our bishops to be stronger than they are, and to speak with more authority and greater courage than they do. I'm afraid, especially around education. It was interesting. I was watching a video just yesterday of. I don't know what it was, a Zoom call about critical thinking, and a teacher was engaging with a student. And the purpose of the lesson was to encourage critical thinking. And the boy in the video came to him and said something like, "Okay, can we discuss this? What do you think about J.K. Rowling and her bigoted views?"
Yes.
And the teacher began by breaking it down and saying, well, there's some assumptions in that question that we have to get to. First of all, I'm not going to answer a question that assumes there are bigoted views unless you can show me evidence that there are bigoted views. This went on, and he said, show me, and he pulled out some tweets, and he said, let's go through these tweets that J.K. Rowling has said. And they were unbelievably gentle tweets, like, I don't mind how you dress, I don't mind you've got freedom to live, but please don't think that you can use women's spaces. It was really a very gentle and compassionate tweet. And this teacher asked the student about each line and said, is there a problem with this? And it was brilliant to see his eyes opening in real time, only over the space of about 10 minutes, where this student had come in absolutely convinced that J.K. Rowling was a horrible transphobe, a bigot, and should be shut down. And within 10 minutes of encouraging questions to think critically, left and actually said, I'm a bit embarrassed now about how I approach this. And I thought, if that's what a good teacher can do in 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, how much influence can we yield to change the culture for the better if Catholic schools in particular use that authority given to them to form our young children to be critical thinkers, to value freedom, to understand what freedom is for, to respect the human person. It's not happening, and it really does need to happen.
Do you know what happened to that teacher?
He got sacked.
Yeah. I
mean, it's unbelievable.
So he became a phenomenon. Everyone said, this is how you do teaching. Isn't this exciting? They did just what you've quite rightly said. This is how it's done. This is wonderful. There was a degree of disquiet, he said, from his employee, from the headmaster and the people who were the trustees of the school. 9 months later, when the public sunshine had gone off him, they hauled him in and they sacked him. And he's gone. And so that's what I meant by saying that the danger is they're still in control of all the institutions. We haven't even begun to fight back. And again, that's another reason for not allowing ourselves to become too euphoric about the fact that Trump is going into the White House. It's only just started. The whole task of reconverting our society has become, for a moment, possible instead of utterly impossible.
Yeah.
That's all that's happened. We've just moved from utterly impossible to possible. It's a paradigm shift, but it doesn't mean we haven't got anywhere yet.
Yeah, totally agree. And as you said, it's the beginning. That's why that's why we're having another conversation. We've already had two before about this election, but it is the beginning, and there's a long way to go yet. I'll finish with my response to David Baddiel, a popular comedian and liberal person, probably you'd say on the progressive left, a celebrity, and who tweeted when Donald Trump won, "Might be time to accept that people are more energized by hate than hope." and I said, hope as in, I hope one day my daughters have the freedom to act without consequence. I hope one day that if it's all too much, doctors can kill me. I hope one day that my son can shut off puberty and turn his penis into a vagina. I hope one day that my hard-earned life savings go to the government to be spent on some of the above, rather than to my own children. I hope one day that my 4 little children are judged not by the content of their characters, but by the colour of their skin. I hope one day that we have so few children that the human population decreases drastically, leaving only rich liberals and a few qualified anaesthetists. I hope one day that people who disagree with me are locked up. I hope one day that there is no such thing as a nation, and seek the destruction of the family to help bring this about. I hope the right kind of man, not the wrong kind of God, rules over everyone. Because to say these are people motivated by hate, not hope, and then to say that some of the things that the other side are offering are hopeful is just la la land as far as I'm concerned.
They've perverted our language. They've changed good into evil. They've changed black into white. And one of the things we're here to do, and one of the things I love Catholic Unscripted, is because we're here to reclaim language, to reclaim the capacity to discern good from evil, and to do that in the company with some very good people who listen to us. So if you have been listening to us, if you are supporting us, if you've taken out a membership, thank you very much. It's in a very good cause. We're very grateful.
Yeah, thank you. We really do appreciate it. Not only that, but we really do need it. So visit catholicunscripted.com, check out our memberships, join below our channel, and we look forward to you returning and engaging in the comments below, sharing and subscribing. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I'm Katherine Bennett.
I'm Gavin Ashenden. Thank you.